Welcome back to NanoCruising, the podcast for dinghy cruising and trailer sailing. Today we talk with Christine Bergen. We'll talk to her about finding her boat, a Sparrow 16, the advantages of her boat, how does she set up her boat, some of excursions. Also, she'll talk about women and sailing, and this is probably good for men to listen to the flip side of that, because sometimes we may not be the best mates. So join us for this episode. All right, Christine, thank you for joining the NanoCruising podcast. I've been looking forward to talk to more women that are into small boat cruising, and I was referred to you. You have a Sparrow 16, which is, for our listeners, is really a longer version of a Guppy 13 or a Sparrow 12. So I think that's about right. It's the same company, but just a bigger version, right?
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a I forget which came first.
I don't know either.
But yes, it's a longer, larger version of the Guppy 12 and Sparrow 13. The configuration is very much the same in that they both have a shoal draft fixed keel.
That's right.
They're fractional rigged sloops, and so it's been a great boat for me. They only made about 150 of them though, and they were built in a small town near Seattle.
Right.
So they're mostly concentrated in the Pacific Northwest.
That's why I've never seen him on this side of the world, really. So
there are one or two I've heard of. One in Texas I know of, at least one.
Tell me about your boat and how you found it and what you've done to it and what you do to it a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So in 2008, I just received 10-year promotion as a professor, and I wanted to give myself a bit of a present. And as I tell people, I wanted my first big boat. And people get a chuckle out of that because it's only 16 feet long. And I didn't quite know exactly what was out there as far as options. And then this boat popped up on Craigslist about an hour and a half north of me. And it was really cheap. It was like $800 with a motor on a trailer.
Wow.
And I got there and the mast was bent. The boyfriend at the time and I were able to straighten it. But as soon as I saw it, it was like, wow, this ticks all the boxes.
It does.
I wanted something that had a cabin that I could comfortably sleep in.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something to, have the amenities like a plate, probably, I didn't know for certain how I was going to make it work, but I definitely had a room for a portable toilet. That was important.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted something that was not going to necessarily get people wet when I took them out sailing with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was mostly thinking in terms of day sailing, and I wanted something easy to set up.
Right.
It only has it's only a 3-state rig,
mm-hmm.
and so the mast is easily walked up. And for a boat that on paper is only a little bit smaller than, say, a Montgomery 17, obviously a very popular small boat,
yep.
It is much easier to set up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those masts on those Montgomery 17s are big.
Mm-hmm.
So then, at first I was a little put off by a fixed keel. Because that meant it's harder to set. At the time, I had to
It does take a little more for trailering, launching, probably, right? That's probably
yes. I got good at the beginning of every season. It's a little hard. It's a little harder than at the end to get in and out of it without a ladder.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned to appreciate it. First was I learned that the keel still worked pretty well for something that was low aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And second was that there's a lot more room in the cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And so that there wasn't a centerboard trunk to get in the way of the space inside. Mm-hmm. And so the boat has a sitting headroom inside. Wow. Just forward of the aft bulkhead of the cabin. You can sit down comfortably. 2 people could.
Yeah. You
wouldn't want to be there for very long. It's still a small boat. And it technically has 4 berths.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of room inside.
Okay.
It's great for single person cruising for a week.
Yeah, that sounds great. To me, it looks, I'm familiar with the Potters. It looks like a smaller Potter 19. I don't know if you've seen that. It looks the same. And the one thing I hated at the Potter 19 is the dagger board. You go on beach, you pull the dagger board up, and it just obstructs the entrance and so on. It was really bad. So this is a really neat configuration for that. You don't have anything to block you coming in.
Oh, no. The one downside is it's a hard boat to beach.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a pretty steep beach to come in. I've only ever tried it once or twice.
Right.
And that's the problem I later solved with the folding dinghy. I thought I wanted a boat I could beach. When I first was looking around, of course, my first big boat, I thought this might be a starter boat. Just to kind of get a feel for things. I'd sailed dinghies way in the past, little open boats, 10 feet at most, 12 feet.
Right.
And so I really thought I'd be one to be, especially sailing in inland lakes, So we have Lake Coeur d'Alene, we have Lake Pend Oreille, we have the Priest Lakes, and quite popular for sailing, actually, especially Pend Oreille, which has some big water. But and so I thought, beaching would be important, and it turned out never to be important. Right. And then when I started, fast forward quite a bit, we'll get back to this, sailing in on the west side of Washington, beaching is not really an option when you have tides.
No, that's right.
Unless you have a really small boat. So it ended up being a non-issue after all. And so, and then it's kind of funny how, like with every boat's compromised, right?
It is, of course.
For instance, I was concerned where to put my stove until I discovered the C-swings, a gimbal stove. And then I was able to put it on the compression post, which when I first got the boat, I was annoyed by, but then it became, this is an asset.
This is useful.
So, and that's been, it worked quite well over the years. And so I wrote an article for Small Craft Advisor and about my boat, and I described it as in the Goldilocks zone for me.
Perfect.
And of course, it all depends on who you are, what your mission is for your boat. I don't know. It'd be pretty cozy to use it to sail as a couple for many days, unless, if I was a lot younger, maybe just a new couple when you're young, it'd be perfect. Yeah. At my age, no, I don't think so. Middle-aged.
I get it. It's a really nice, like you say, it's a nice compromise of functionality. I think if there was more out here, I'd definitely have one. It's one of those. And
it's a very seaworthy boat. You mentioned how it looks a lot like a Potter 19. And a lot of that comes from the cabin shape, but also the hard shine hull.
Right.
Now, unlike a Potter 19, it has a rounded hull, athwartship. And so when being a shoal draft, you sail it quite upright. It actually is unless you're chopping big waves, which would slow down any small boat, it actually goes pretty quick. And so it's a nice compromise because the hard shine does give some form stability, but also more volume inside.
It does.
For its length.
Yeah. And it keeps it dry too a little bit, right? It does keep it dry too, the height.
Yes, it does. It has a pretty high coaming. The coaming in the cockpit comes up above the small of my back. You feel you actually you're in the boat when you're sailing. You're not on the boat, you're sailing in it.
Nice.
So yeah, no, I find there's a time I'll tell you about later. We were going through some pretty big waves, and actually it was a quite dry ride, even in some challenging conditions.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
And of course I did the standard things like, bring the lines aft for the halyards. I installed a jib downhaul. Yeah, I did all the lines aft. I added a topping lift which could serve as an extra halyard if necessary. But that's really helped for the reefing.
Yeah.
And then I also installed a jib downhaul, which was very good, so I don't have to go forward on go to the foredeck in bad weather, because when in the Pacific Northwest, when the winds get up, like a lot of places, you can be overpowered, and so you want some way to douse the jib. For my 115, the downhaul is installed as a GER downhaul, so it douses the jib immediately. Just all I have to do is release the jib sheets and then pull on the downhaul, and it gathers the jib up against the forestay.
Perfect.
Then I can, if I also release the halyard, I can lower it all the way. But I like keeping things simple and using simple hardware so it doesn't break. Then the final thing I added was kind of almost like a clothesline. I call it a hauling line in order to help bring the anchor rope up to the bow, so that I can deploy, stay head to wind when I'm anchoring.
Nice.
And that's been, again, keep me off the foredeck. Or I only need to go to the foredeck once things are secure, because as a single handing sailor and on a small boat, you're much more susceptible to falling over.
So
I like breaking things down to keep things. That's my philosophy, to keep things simple.
That's great.
My overall philosophy is take what could be scary or even dangerous and just make it annoying.
Okay, got it.
And so that applies to bad weather, wearing your foul weather gear.
Yeah, yes.
and so forth, and practicing your skill set.
And you've done a lot of trailering, I guess, and long trips and so on. So tell us about some of these places, some of these venues you've been to, the Salish Sea, I guess, as well. And
yes, of course. Yes. So primarily I live in North Idaho, which is on the very east end of Washington State. And Seattle's about a 300-mile drive, to get perspective for your listeners. And so in addition to the closest large lake north here, about a 45-minute drive, and several lakes north of there, about once a year or so, I will go to the Salish Sea, whether on my own to the town of Port Townsend, which has a lot of events for small boats, or with my local sailing club, and we'll have a small boat cruise of up to about half a dozen boats, as few as 3 sometimes.
Nice.
And it's about a week to 2 weeks, depending on the trip, either in cruising the San Juan Islands in Washington or the Gulf Islands, British Columbia.
Right.
When
you have your passport.
Well, yes, you remember that. Yes. One year, it was actually 2 years ago. We were getting prepared for a nice trip through the Gulf Islands, and I discovered I didn't have my passport, so I had to do a solo trip, which was an interesting challenge in and of itself. 1 year, we instead of a normal trip on our own for the inaugural year of the Salish 100 group cruise. We were participated in the Salish 100 for the first, I think that was 2019. And that was from the South Sound, Olympia, all the way up to Port Townsend. It was about 100 boats and about 100 nautical miles.
Nice.
It was interesting to realize, I think that really I was kind of appreciating my skill set over the years, how much I had developed before that, but being around people who had never done anything remotely close to that on the Salish 100 reinforced the fact, like, oh, I'm one of the almost experts now, I guess. And so that was fun.
Yes.
And then there was, and then 1 year we actually went to Desolation Sound, and that was obviously much more of a logistical challenge. It's at least a day and a half drive. Tough if you're by yourself driving. And the customs, the woman at the customs going into Canada was a bit surprised to see my small boat. She said, "Where are you going with this?" And I said, "We're going to Desolation Sound." "Oh, where are you going to launch somewhere?" "Yeah, launch at Lund." And she says, "Oh, so you just go out for the day and come back?" No, we're going to go tool around, be anchoring out. She goes, "In that?" I said, "Well, you worked up to it." It was kind of funny.
It's
so
cozy.
I forget how small my boat looks.
What's the different set of skills you need in between the local lakes you do and when you go on, of course, you get the tides and so on. So what do you feel are the different set of skills you need?
Well, for sailing locally, and we also actually, the club I'm a member of, it's a small, very informal club, was originally formed for people who wanted to sail and race each other on the Snake River down at the confluence of the Snake and Clearwater rivers downstream from that. When they put the last dam in on the Snake River, which is and creates some slack water.
Okay.
And so that's at the bottom of a canyon, and we're surrounded by mountains typically.
So that's actually probably more challenging because it's fluky.
It's very challenging. The being inland also with the when you have the heating of the air during the day, so you have wind shifts. Typically, when the wind gets up where we are, it also means the wind gets gusty. As opposed to coastal sailing, where if the wind is strong, it's still steady, and which makes it much easier to sail. You just reduce sail area. If you're sailing hard on the wind, what you find yourself is bearing away a bit more, so that if you don't have any accidental tacks. And similar with the jives,
right? You
find yourself being much more conservative so that you can adapt. It keeps you on your toes, and so that's the biggest difference.
True.
And also, you have to be ready to use your motor because sometimes it does go slack. The only other thing is at the north end of Lake Coeur d'Alene, and I mostly stay on the south end, a lot of motorboat chop. And so if the wind isn't very strong, it's hard to move through that. And so that's just more of a frustration. Now, in contrast, going to the Salish Sea, it's a protected area from the ocean, but the winds tend to be much more steady. And if the weather changes, you see it coming. I mean, sure, every now and then we see thunderstorms, but it's pretty rare. It's not very common. For instance, I was thinking of up in the Desolation Sound, we saw these black clouds forming, and we saw the rain coming down. It's like, and we just motored as fast as we could. Of course, that's not very fast in a small boat when your hull speed's maybe 5 knots.
Yes.
And so I remember getting to my little anchorage and just dropping the anchor and going below, and it was raining so hard I found leaks in my hull to deck joint where water was getting.
There you go. Wow.
And marked it with a Sharpie so I could fix it later.
Right.
But you see it coming, and so the immediate challenges in the sailing will be just when the wind does get up is dealing with the waves.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a lot larger fetch. And so, or the worst case when you have a confused sea because of currents joining or wind against current. Mm-hmm. And so the tides, of course, that's a challenge for anchoring. But the biggest thing is that with all those islands, the currents get quite complicated.
Okay.
And so it's a fun challenge. So it's a fun, it's a fun intellectual challenge to puzzle out how to use those currents to your advantage, and also to make sure you time things correctly so you get to where you need to be before they switch.
Right.
Or go through a certain pass at slack tide or something like that. So it's that becomes a bit of a challenge with that. And so therefore you definitely need your motor. And so for that, we always account for planning purposes, making about 2 to 3 knots for planning purposes. That tends to work out pretty well for us. And so that helps with allowing for, tacking, but then also sometimes the currents are with us, sometimes they're just zero. It works out pretty well for where we go.
So you mentioned you have a sailing girl. Was that the Lewis Clark Sailing Association, which I love the name?
That is correct. The Lewis Clark Sailing Association. That is the
what a great
club
name.
Was formed. Yes.
Explorers. And, yes.
Everything is named after Lewis and Clark down in, especially about 30 miles south of me.
Of course.
In Lewiston and Clarkston. Lewiston, Idaho, Clarkston, Washington. And again, it's a confluence of the Snake and Clearwater rivers. Clearwater rivers is the river down which Lewis and Clark came, about 1802 or so, 1803. And so, but yeah, it was formed by a bunch of people who they were interested in sailing, and then someone started selling them all San Juan 21s, which are those fast boats.
They're fast boats.
Oh boy,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there's still national sailing regattas with that, and we have people that. And over the years, though, things change. The old guard kind of, just got older, and we had more cruising interests in our club now. And although there's some overlap for a little while, one of our current members, though, he would take his San Juan 21 on our cruises with us, and we learned from each other an awful lot, which is the best thing about the club. It's actually,
great, yeah.
For instance, the one with the San Juan 21, Jerry, he because he did a lot of racing, he knew all about sail trim. Mm-hmm. Oh boy, and he was good at that. Although the cruising was totally new to him, and I hope if he hears this, he doesn't feel too bad. There is an instance where he didn't quite appreciate how fast the tide could go down when we were at a place called Susha, Fossil Bay, and his centerboard got stuck in the mud. Now, it was quickly resolved, but it was you can't take that for granted. His boat was so fast, though, he would keep a reef in his main so that he wouldn't outsail us. And even then, he would come back and circle around and take pictures of people because he was still faster than everybody else.
Yep.
And we have boats that were in the 21-foot length range, too, but those San Juan 21s are fast. What we did also learn, because we compare our boats, is just the accommodations weren't that great. It's pretty cramped inside of one of those, especially when you get older. So, every boat's, like I said, every boat's a compromise. And right. It's all about the balance you have for what your mission is for your boat. So we have in a club, we have a couple that sail a Welsford Penguin with a gaff rig. That's a right. Okay. Yeah.
Well, those are rare. They're home built, obviously. So they're.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. Beautiful boat.
Beautiful boats. Yes.
Before they had it, they sailed a Potter 19, and my lighthearted joke with them is that I'm mad at them for getting rid of the Potter 19 because under the right conditions, I could outsail them in my Sparrow 16, and so I could outpoint them. And unless the winds got up, because sail area just a larger boat, I can almost always outsail them. So I was mad. Now And if for a boat that's gaff rigged, that Welsford Penguin is fast and stable. The what else?
Welford's boat, they're all stable and fast. They're
boy,
like
yeah. And then there's the Montgomery 15.
Mm-hmm.
We have friends that have a San Juan 23. That's nice. Good sized boat inside, comfortable.
Nice.
And then, God, off the top of my head, I can't remember now. Oh, a Montgomery 17 cruises.
Nice.
And so forth. So we have but they're all trailable.
Yeah. Yes.
And so forth.
So,
and we have a friend that lives in near Wenatchee, which is on the east slope of the Cascade Mountains, which bisect north to south Washington State. And he has a Bayfield 25, and he's joined us too.
Oh, can he?
I always like to say that's more on the transportable end of the spectrum, not quite trailable. Although he's really good at launching out.
It's trailerable, but it's not a 5-minute launch job. No.
But no, it's an impressive boat. Although it's not happy until the winds get up to at least 15 knots.
Yeah, it needs a lot of wind. That's right.
That's when I first put my first reef in, is at 15. So it's a very different end of the spectrum there for us. But it's very impressive how he's learned how to do it. So it's and that's a boat that can easily do the inside passage.
Nice.
Nice. That it's substantial enough, has standing headroom inside.
Yeah.
It's a neat boat.
It's a nice boat. It's a nice boat. Your members do trips together? You go on different.
Yes. We tend to have one big trip, like typically to the Salish Sea.
Right.
And of course, and what's nice there is that having sailed on locally where the winds can be very fluky.
Yes.
When we get over there, it's like a treat. And like the winds are steady. And I remember the first time, it's like we're on the radios. We're hoping a pod of orca would come close, and we were just drifting around a little bit, not going very fast. I said, okay, it's time to go to the bay. We're anchored. And I remember setting the sail trim and setting the tiller tamer, just sitting back, and it's like, what do I do now? I didn't have to do anything. The boat just went. And it was so unnatural. So it was a bit spoiled. So we try to do that once a year, a big trip. We have other little trips. One of the things we always do, though, and this was instituted by the person in charge of cruising, which is something that I'm taking over.
You're the Commodore now, I think, right?
I have been the Commodore. I have been the Commodore.
Okay.
And but now I'm going to be in charge of the cruising.
Okay.
Is that we always have a shakedown cruise.
Good
and
idea.
the criteria for a shakedown cruise, you have to be on the water for at least 2 nights.
Right.
Because a single night, you just stow everything back. You just throw it back into the into the B berth and go back. No. We purposely use it as a way to practice.
Yes.
Things like putting a reef in, anchoring, and stowing things again.
Yes.
And also just making sure we find out, with a few weeks ahead of time at least, so that you can fix things before we go on the big cruise. Because one of the things that we try to embody, which I really like about the group, we take pride in our seamanship.
Nice.
Now, we're not ocean sailors, blue water sailors, but that whenever possible to be prepared, and of course it's nice to have other people to help with things. Mm-hmm. But even on the water, your friends, they're still a mile away. They can take quite a while. Something bad goes sideways. Something bad happens.
That's right.
And you need to be able to be prepared.
That's right.
And so there is. I love that mindset.
I do too. You're on your own. You sail on your own, but you're in a group, but you sail on your own. I like that a lot. Yeah. Right. So.
Exactly. And so you need, in the moment, you need to be able to take care of yourself, and have thought these things through. What do you do? Always, and not just have a plan B, but a plan C. Mm-hmm. And for instance, I've never had to put a second reef in my main. Mm. It's nice to know it's there, though.
I don't even have a second reef. So.
Yes. There's a sailmaker up in Spokane, about 90 miles north of me, Jaeger Sails, and he sailed a lot on the west side also. And I told him that I was getting into this and going on the west side.
It's a good idea to have multiple reefs.
Yeah, and so he said, I thought, do I need a second reef? He said, yeah, you're going to want a second reef. And also, that's when I got my heavy weather jib. It's not a storm jib, it's a heavy weather. It's an 85.
Okay.
And so every morning I listen to the weather while I eat my oatmeal. Mm-hmm. And if the forecast includes sustained winds up to 15, I'll put the small jib on. I don't lose an awful lot. I don't quite point as well, but with a stronger wind, it doesn't matter so much.
No.
And actually, I don't drift as much.
Mm.
And it's also the balance fore aft on the sails. That with the 85, I don't lose much, but it's really well balanced with the first reef fin.
Nice.
And so that's the only other option would be to put a reefing furler on. But if for a boat this size, that's a lot of hardware, and I like to keep things simple.
Mm-hmm.
And so hence my jib, and hence my downhaul.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's a great compromise. Absolutely.
Again, it's always compromises.
Yeah.
Would I like to be able to fine tune the weather helm? Yes. Do I have a pretty good system as it is now? Also, yes.
And you write for SC pretty regularly?
Small Craft Advisor magazine. I joked with the editor, Josh Colvin. It's a great magazine. Now it's online now.
It is online, yeah.
Like a lot of things. I joked with Josh, do I get to call myself one of the Small Craft Advisor glitterati? He goes, yes, you get to do that now. But I guess I've written an article about my boat. They had a reader boat. And then I did one about my cruise 2 summers ago.
Right.
It was my first long solo cruise. So that was out of necessity because I forgot my passport, which was an interesting challenge. And then there was one about building my Origami 6 and deployment of my Origami 6 folding dinghy.
Yes.
And then I did a couple of technical ones on how I set up my tiller tamer, and then also for the jib downhaul. No, actually I did one also for the hauling line for the anchoring.
There you go.
No, these weren't necessarily the most groundbreaking things, but they're good stuff. It's fun to, compare notes. I'm really proud of the tiller tamer because I have a system by which it takes up the slack and so it would also fail. If it were to fail, it fails in a safe way, so I still won't lose control. But again, a tiller tamer is only so good because on a small boat, just moving forward changes the trim of the boat and you start turning. So.
Right. But you need it because you don't want to be holding this all the time. So
you only have two hands.
You only have two hands. Yes, exactly. So that's needed. That's the first thing that goes on a small boat for sure.
Hey, along those lines is how you set up your boat for when you're actually under sail. And so for one thing, everything gets rearranged just for going underway so that you can, if you need equipment, you need food, you need your foul weather gear, it's all easy to get to right inside the cabin. So that's part of the philosophy of having to be, when you're by yourself, anticipating what you might need, not because you're scared, but because, again, trying to make it annoying. It's like, I got to put my foul weather gear on. You don't want to have to go digging through the cabin trying to find what you need when you really need it.
Is there a lot of women in your world too? In our world, there's not a lot. There's a few, but and what advice would you give to women wanting to get into NanoCruising sailing?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing is that if there's a way to start sailing a small, of course, just learning to sail in a small dinghy, you can do that anywhere. I mean, the sailboat I grew up sailing. I first learned to sail in what's called a sea scooter. Or Sea Scouter, which was a small 10-foot dinghy that was originally designed for the Sea Scouts in the Seattle area. Okay. It's 10 feet long. Okay. I still have the one my father bought. There you go. It's been a long time. I'm way overdue to finish restoring it. But it's a little, it's kind of heavy, but it's a fun little boat. And then in graduate school, I had a Super Snark. Oh, yes. And there's no reason not to go out and just get a little boat, start playing with it.
Perfect. I like that.
But as far, just the nice thing about small boats is that you can just do it, and you don't need anyone else there. And you can, and I think all sailors know this. You can create the challenges you want, and that you can ease into it as much as you want. Now, there's no reason not to, and you can do it at your own scale. Right. If you have only have a small vehicle to tow with, get a small boat, get a Potter 15. That's right. And you can always get another boat if you want a bigger one. Now,
mini boats, nothing wrong with mini boats.
Never enough. Must have all the boats. At the moment where I live, I only have room for the ones I have. There are two challenges that women have that I've noticed over the years. I didn't think much of this because I grew up near Seattle. Everyone sailed. But there's two things. First is that even the most well-meaning guys can come off as know-it-alls. And I've seen this in a lot of other venues. And being single, to middle age. And it's the vive la différence type situation here where, in the most innocent way, you can kind of chuckle at it. Guys want to show off they're useful to women, oftentimes, or to prospective mates, to be much more, inclusive too. But with the male-female dynamic, there's a lot of social pressures to be certain ways, expectations. And it takes an extra effort. And just know to get into it. The nice thing is, though, thanks to the internet, it's really easy to find Facebook groups or other groups that are women sailors. Nice. If nothing else, you get to complain and chuckle about the guys that seem to think they know it all.
Yeah.
So I remember coming to a dock. Where was that? It's Nordland, south of Port Townsend. And a fellow wanted to help me. And of course, when things are happening on a boat, sometimes you have to be very curt. It's like, no, back off. I know what I'm doing. And I know my boat so well now. I can just, even under sail, I can just come in or cut the motor, drift in. I got my 2 mooring lines already hooked up, and I can just wrap the cleats, and I'm done. And, he thinks he's helping, but he really's not. The guys will offer help in a way that they would never do for another guy. Right? And so, I know it's well-meaning. Yes. And so it's an extra hassle. And at the end of it, I said, I'm sorry I had to be curt with you about that. Things are happening quick. And he says, yeah, I can tell you didn't need my help. So we had a good chuckle after that. It was good. Nice. Had a nice conversation later.
Good.
The other thing that I noticed is sailing couples. Mm-hmm. Now, I realize it's not just a male-female thing. It could be any time there is an experience difference.
Yes.
That one person will take a subordinate role. And there's a few aspects we can talk about that. One is that it takes the fun out of it for the person who takes the helm. Mm-hmm. And that let them have the fun of it, the puzzle. Because what is sailing? It's working with the wind. And at times working with the current. You can't impose yourself on it. You have to work with it and figure out how the boat works. And it's not just an engineering or a science. There's an art to it. You have to get a feel for it.
There is.
And there's a satisfaction knowing how to do that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
2, it's a safety thing.
Mm-hmm,
if something happens to the person who does know what they're doing, you need the other person to know what to do.
Absolutely.
And also, so that was very good. And the other thing is, so a major turning point for me, several years, was it? So I got my boat in autumn of 2008. So I didn't really sail it that year. So the 3rd season of sailing, it would have been 2012, I think it was. I participated in the inaugural year of what was called the Small Craft Skills Academy. Okay. That was being run by a guy named Howard Rice. Perhaps you know him.
Yeah, I know him.
You know Howard too. Good.
Mr. Escamp boy. Yeah.
The scamp guy. Yeah.
Scamp guy.
So I got to know Howard quite well.
Nice.
And he's been a major influence on my philosophy of small boat sailing, taking care of yourself and so forth. So one day, it was kind of scary. The winds were getting up. And Howard loves heavy air, he calls it. He started doing his, kind of the evil rolling your hands together. And it was like, and of the people there, we had about the equivalent of about 8 boats worth or 10 boats of people. Some of us were single, some were couples. And only 3 of us were sent out. 3 boats were sent out. And I was single-handed, so they put me with the kid who was 18, who was on the Port Townsend High School sailing team. The Catalina 22 went out. And Ian Ottred Wee Seal went out about 16 feet, but heavier boat. And then my boat. And leaving Point Hudson Marina, there's a dog leg to the left as you leave. And there's you're parallel to the shore on the port side. Well, we had a current heading at us, parallel to the shore at that point, and a wind off the starboard beam. And the waves were quite confused, and there were at least 20 gusting to 25. And very confused seas. And unbeknownst to us, right when we left the breakwater, they were trying to call us back on the radio. And so, but the other 2 boats are out. The Catalina 22, they had some issues with their furler. The Wee Seal, it was a new boat to the people, and they later had great times with it, but they had a halyard get wrapped around their motor, which was only a 3-horse. I have a 4 now, a 5-horse on mine. But we're trying to go out there, and we're motoring, and the motor's coming out of the water with the waves, because short, stacked waves. And,
yeah.
Yes. And I, I was asking the young guy, because he knew a lot about sailing, because I felt relatively new, what should we do, what should we do? And then suddenly something clicked. And I just started shouting orders. And this is something that is, women can have a hard time with, and I later learned the importance of that when you're in charge, you're responsible, you need people to follow. And just because you're raising your voice doesn't mean you're mad. Mm-hmm. And that is something that culturally is hard, I think, for women. We had a big debriefing after all this. At one point, someone called 911 on the boats that went further out.
Oh my God!
Apparently, everything was fine.
Yeah.
And I related this story about learning how to do this, and Howard was smirking a bit and said, "Yeah, that's why we put you with the young guy. We wanted you to be in charge because I was only sailed on my own."
Right.
And so now it's become a standard little debrief or briefing, a pre-brief with my any guests I have on board. It's like, just so you know, if I start shouting orders, not because I'm mad, it's because things happen now and I'm responsible.
I'm in charge. That's right. That's great.
So and that's a good thing for anybody.
Yes.
But especially for, the social dynamics of women. And so those are the three things.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Well, that I would share. It's okay to be the skipper in charge.
Well, thank you, Christine. It's been great talking to you. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's been so fun talking to you. And I mean, it's so fun to talk to other small boats. It's been very fun talking with you and sharing this. And the only thing, the best advice is just get out there and go sailing, right?
That was great, wasn't it? Good lessons. In our next episode, we talk to the legend Sven Berven. He's a Swedish sailor and boat builder and rider. He is very famous for sailing across oceans in tiny boats of his own design. He'll come and tell us about his stories and his advices for sailing, for building small boats. I thank our listener for joining us. If you want more content or interact more, join us on a Facebook group, NanoCruising. To not miss an episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Go to nanocruising.com and subscribe. And as usual, seize your own adventure.